and then we'll continue to admit participants as they come in. Good morning and welcome to the RIAC Learning Series. My name is Vanessa Brewer and I am the Regional Interagency Council Program Administrator, also known as RIAC. I work at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. My co-host is Lee Taylor. She is the State Interagency Council Program Administrator, also at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. If you've not attended before, the RIAC Learning Series was created as a response to evaluation input that we received from participants that attended a RIAC workshop last winter. And so several topics were listed as needing more information in order to support the work of RIAC and system of care efforts. So all topics in the RIAC Learning Series are RIAC driven. These learning opportunities are offered on the first Friday of the month at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we try to keep them to an hour, maybe an hour and a half, but never longer than that. So our presentation today is Youth Connectedness, and our speakers are Donna, Butler and Alaysia Hamilton with Enrich Families. Before I turn it over to them, I wanted to go over just a few netiquette housekeeping items. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and mute your mics. This workshop will be recorded and posted on the RIAC webpage to use as a resource and to share with others on your councils or your agencies that couldn't make it today. And so we will put the link to the webpage in the chat box. It's also always on the bottom of my contact information. If you ever get an email from me, it's always at the bottom. Just a few more things. You may use the chat and/or Q&A box for questions if you have them. Lee and I will both be monitoring this during the session. And speaking with Donna and Alaysia before everybody came on, the goal of this session is to be very interactive and engaging. So if you have questions or if you have comments, please feel free to ask them. And we'll stop at that point and get those questions answered or addressed. We do have some time carved out at the end for questions and answers as well. If you want to wait till then, it's completely fine, whatever you're comfortable with. Also, certificates of attendance are available by request. So please email me if you'd like to have one, and I will put my email in the chat box for you to have. So please join me in welcoming Donna and Asia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Butler, and it's just a pleasure to be with you all today. As Vanessa mentioned, she said that what Alaysia and I were presenting today was from it's a nonprofit, and Enrich Families is how the community knows what the nonprofit is. It's a very grassroots nonprofit. There are no paid staff or anything like that. And it's always just been kind of evolving community members that sit on the board to kind of keep this going. People who were passionate about our community, passionate when they heard about the protective factors, which many of you are familiar with. We started out doing parent cafes about 8 or 9 years ago in our community, and then very quickly moved to piloting what it would look like to do something that we just termed as youth cafes around the protective factors. We found that the young people don't really like it to be termed youth cafes, but these are all some of our lessons learned that we'll share with you. I do want to talk to you for just a minute about that before I introduce Alaysia. And to also tell you, whenever I said, there are no paid positions and we're all volunteers, this is just something I was passionate about, found other people in my community that was passionate about, but it's not my full-time job at all. Sometimes people are like, hey, can you come and do this? Or will your organization do this? And I'm like, oh, well, I'll have to take time off or do it in the evening. So it's just a fire that got lit 8 or 9 years ago, and people in the community have fanned that flame and have helped me do it. So I'm very proud of that and our ability to work together in this initiative. And the other thing that I was going to mention was the card sets that I'm going to talk about at the end. They were developed about 6 or 7 years ago from just doing a pilot with some people who worked in the school systems. And I'll share more about that later, but they were developed with kids and for, or with students and young people and for young people. They weren't something that we just said, hey, let's think of some questions. So they're very thought provoking. They come from the hearts of young people. And again, everything that we're doing and talking about is going to be centered to how we use this tool in the end. So I wanted to kind of introduce that first. And one of my partners and board members works at the McCracken County Library, and I'll let her tell you a little about herself.
Hi, my name is Alaysia, and I've actually known Donna for a really long time. And so she came to me and, asked me to be on the board. And I, of course, said yes. And after being voted on, I guess, not just saying. But yeah, so I've been on it for a couple of months now. Oh my gosh, was it at the beginning of this year?
Yeah, it's not a couple of months, but that's okay. I'll have COVID brains and
Right.
time is an issue. Alicia's been on the board for a year now.
I can't even. Okay. Well, anyway, yes, I've been on the board for a little while, and I finally got to do some fun stuff, I guess. We've done 3 events this summer, and they've been really fun. But yes, LaDonna said I work at the library. I've worked here for about 6 years, and I'm always looking for community partnerships. And so this one was perfect. I work with all ages, but I was a little nervous to start working with teens because, you just don't ever know how they're going to be. But this was great, and I'm so excited to talk about this today. Passing it back to you, LaDonna.
Okay, well, I'll let you pull up the PowerPoint, and again, be hopefully conversational. I know it's a little early on a Friday and it's a holiday weekend, but please don't leave Alaysia and I hanging out here and ask questions. Okay.
I'm going to share the screen.
Sure.
Okay.
So this is from our first event this summer. Now, we have been having what we're going to term, just for this conversation, because it's easier for us to track and think about what this process looks like, especially if you have participated or heard about a parent cafe or a provider cafe that Kentucky Strengthening Families is currently doing. So this is when we started back up at the beginning of the summer. And you'll see there that we're outside, we're trying to be safe. We're only meeting outside. Kids can wear a mask if they choose to. You can see Alaysia there in the background with the library cards. And she comes to our events and hands out free books in the library. And I do want her to, and she'll share later about some of those books, but the young people are very excited to show up. They can all get a free book either before or after. And the library is currently, because of COVID, having to stop outside programming, but they're still providing books. So that's wonderful. But now my partnership with Alaysia's, we have to work that out kind of as we go with everything that we're adapting. But we have about 24 in attendance. And these young people are inviting each other. Alaysia does share it on the McCracken County, the McCracken County Library page. We have a few posters up, but people aren't getting out necessarily and milling around like they used to. And we just kind of turn it over to some of the young people who are interested in the event, and they're sharing it on their Instagram. So this was our first one this summer, and the only invites were them inviting each other. And there were homeschool students, there were McCracken County students, and Paducah City School students, which is all the surrounding schools that we have. In the past, when we have had these events over the past probably 5 years is when we got the card sets really developed and out there. We have had them at the same coffee shop inside. We've had them in different types of settings, but this one works very well because we can do it outside and the students can just go in and order their coffee. One of the things that or their treat or whatever they might want. One of the things that we struggled with in the past is you don't ever know if 3 people are going to show up or if 23 people are going to show up. So when we first started and the young people weren't inviting each other, we sometimes had a lot of food waste because we would order, pizzas and, things like that. So this has worked very well this summer. I just wanted to show you this picture. It makes me so happy to see the young people gathering together. You'll see at the bottom, and I'll share it later, the connectdiscoverlaunch.com. That's the website of the nonprofit, and we've been doing different kinds of engaging conversations, and especially delving into whatever issues are relevant to our community and to our state.
I want to add one thing. On each table, there are also like little fidget toys, and they seem really small, but they actually help with icebreakers or awkwardness or any type of uncomfortable, feeling that we might have at the beginning. And it really just puts us at ease. And so, yes, fidget toys are on the table. All sorts of cool little neat toys that make a huge difference, and they're really tiny. Just wanted to add that.
You can move on to the next slide. So these are the things that we're going to talk about. So if you see something that stands out to you, hey, I want to ask about that. I'm going to make sure that during the presentation, we talk about all of these different things, because when I sit down and I think about now, what has this looked like? We don't really think of this as a program, as something, hey, you just take and do it. We've seen it very much as an evolving approach over time, and what interested the young people and what they really wanted to focus on, and what stands out to them and what's relevant to the times that they were currently living in or the situations that they were facing. So these are the things, I'm just going to read over them just very quickly that we're going to go over and discuss. So if there's something that sticks out to you, again, just you might want to make a note of it, that you ask a question. So the first thing is the protective factors. I don't know if everyone is familiar with them, so I am going to go over them just a little bit and how we came to using those. I'm going to talk to you about forging partnerships, some partnerships that work, some partnerships and waiting on how we can do things sometimes held us back. And that is going to be shared when I talk about lessons learned. The fact that it's an evolving approach, it really is. And I know I've mentioned that several times, but I think just being so open and flexible and just willing to let things happen, especially in the world that we're currently living in. I'm going to talk about obstacles that we've faced, and we all know that COVID has been a number one obstacle for all of us. I'm going to share some success stories, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the conversation cards, let you ask questions, and just talk about how well they've worked for us. And I'm going to skip around in talking about these things too at some point. So you'll see the first picture on this page is at the library, and it's in the conference room there. And this was probably our last face-to-face meeting that we had before COVID shut us down. You can't see the person or identify anybody really, but the person under the clock, her name is Kate Kreiner, and she's off at college now, and she did help us kickstart this summer. But she was one of our very strong young people in leading this effort. And she focused a lot on mental health. That was very, very important to her. That was something that's, of course, important to all of us. but the young person that kind of led the effort and initiated a lot of things before her really focused on the protective factors as just what the protective factors are. He didn't share a lot of information about how that pertained to your mental health, but she came right out with suicide prevention. She wanted us to get t-shirts made, which we did. We changed the idea of we're having these meetups to actually calling it something and giving it a name that meant a lot to her and some young people that had gathered together. But again, all of the meetups and the things that we were having, the tool, the card set is just a tool. So if you have a group that's already gathered or already has a name, you can just use that tool within it. But for our local chapter or using that, she developed that. Then she took it online. She had trained table hosts that then she trained to be breakout host on Zoom. So that's our next picture. And that worked really well at first. At first, that went all right. But after time, just like many of us, Zoom got to be overwhelming. They were doing all their schoolwork, on the computer and virtual. And so the participation in that really waned over time. We also found that same thing that happened with our parent cafes. When we went virtual, we had 35 people at first. And by the time we kind of, by the time, and we're not doing virtual anymore. And by the time we kind of, I guess, got into about 6 months of that, our participation dropped by a lot. So that is very concerning in our current times. But I do want to let you know that is a struggle that we face. That is an obstacle that we have. And then we decided we would just start meeting outside over the summer to try to kickstart interest. We had Kate, as I mentioned before, home from college, and Alaysia also was about to go off to college. And I'll share some insight from him in a little while, but he also participated in the ones that we had outside this summer. So those were two very strong leaders that were helping us initially before COVID, and then they tried to help kickstart it and create interest since participation wasn't working virtually. All right, I'm going to pause for just a minute and see if you all have any questions about what I just shared about the transfer to in-person, virtual, and back, as Alaysia moves us to the next slide. Okay, so these are the protective factors. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. These are the protective factors. And I'm going to talk about how we evolved to this because these are a little different. So could we have, like, maybe in the chat box, how many people, just if you could say whether or not you're familiar with the protective factors for young people. You might be familiar with the protective factors for families, but I want to know who is familiar with them for the young people. If you guys could type that in the chat box, that would be really helpful. And Vanessa, can you just kind of let me know in the group, how many people you feel like, if it's something that I should spend more time on? I think I've only seen where a few people have shared.
So we've got about 5 or 6 people that have shared, and it's kind of split in half, maybe one more that's not than that is. So maybe spend a little bit of time talking about them.
Sure. Okay, so one of the things about COVID that it actually has been wonderful for me is the ability to just talk to people in agencies like the Center for the Study of Social Policy. I mean, I've emailed them before, I've had conversations, I've met with them, but COVID has really allowed people from working from home to have that space to say, hey, LaDonna, I have 30 minutes, if you want to meet. So I've met everyone that works in the Youth Thrive department of the Center the Center for the Study of Social Policy. That's a huge tongue twister. And so I'm going to now start calling it CSSP. Okay. Just want you to know where that comes from. So CSSP actually developed the protective factors for families, which are research informed. And they also have a whole department that focuses on Youth Thrive. They've been doing that for many years now. I had the opportunity probably 4 years ago, maybe 5, to actually travel to St. Louis because they came locally and worked with a university that did a Youth Thrive training. So it was a 3-day, very intensive workshop where I met people who lead youth all over the United States. You know, there were people in New York that worked with young people that they were pulling out of gangs. I mean, it was a very, very insightful and informative opportunity to really examine and look at the protective factors for young people. I don't know if you all are familiar with the premises that Kentucky Strengthening Families have, but the Youth Thrive protective factors are very much rooted in the premises. I didn't, since this is more of a presentation about the tool that we're going to end up talking about, I didn't introduce the premises to you all today, but if you're interested in those, you can certainly find them on the CSSP.org website, and you can look at the premises. They have several slideshows. It's very informative. Now, I want to talk about CSSP and their approach to using the protective factors and where they are with that and where we are as a very small community. And that is that when we think about the protective factors for families and youth, they're for all families and they're for all young people. But CSSP currently and Youth Thrive is very dedicated to youth and care. Their focus is really centered on that. They have a lot of people working in that in research and trying to change the mindsets of people and organizations and communities and the juvenile justice system, all of these agencies and partners who work with youth and care. So I just want to pose the question, it is very hard to change a person's mindset, right? And so it's like this machine that is running, and in many times CSSP is trying to interact with that in a way that they can change people's mindsets. Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing that. Vanessa's shared the CSSP website. It is very difficult to reach young people with some of, I just want to say, with some of the approaches that we are used to using. And that's something that we really have concentrated on and have partnered with CSSP so they understand where we're at. Our community, and I live in Paducah, Kentucky, is very small. It's it's in far west Kentucky. And we have some very strong community partnerships. We have a lot of opportunities to work together. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes it's because we have to, because we're in the far west. We don't always have a lot of resources. And so we have been able to really take these protective factors and initiate them in our community through our partnerships and through our relationships with people. CSSP, and I'm going to talk about just the Youth Thrive department. I worked with them on, listen, you have these protective factors for young people. And when I read them, I understand what they mean. I understand that you're really trying to communicate those to workers who are working with young people in care. But I want to communicate the protective factors for Youth Thrive to young people. I want them to be able to use terminology that they can easily relate to others with and understand and apply to their lives. And I'll give you an example. One of Youth Thrive's protective factors is social and emotional competence. Okay, now, is that something that we can, I'm not going to have a conversation with Vanessa and say, Vanessa, how do you feel about your social and emotional competence? You know, that's not going to probably work even as adults, as much as how, you know, are you feeling self-aware? I mean, doesn't that sound something that's more relatable to us as people? Well, to young people, that was very, very important. So we worked with a small group of young people that Kate Kreiner, who was the person that I shared about earlier. We looked at those protective factors. We looked at the names of the protective factors, the definitions that CSSP was using, that they were putting out there, and they're still using the same protective factors and the same definitions, but we vetted what our young people came up with as their interpretation of the protective factors and how that they applied to their lives with the Center for the Study of Social Policy. So these are what we're using with youth who might be in care, but really in our approach to all youth. And I wanted to say that, so if you get on the CSSP website, you say, oh, well, these are different. They are different, but they have been vetted and approved by Youth Thrive. They have our card sets on their site. They actually have a resource list where you can find resources for Youth Thrive. And this is one of the tools that they have with a list of, you know, many, many other things that are used across the nation. So the first one that we have is relationship, learning how to form safe and healthy relationships that allow you to be your true self. Support, finding community and resources you need to get help and support in your life. Knowledge, knowing, understanding, and learning more about yourself. Awareness, understanding your own thoughts and feelings and how to convey those to others. And resilience, being able to bounce back and stabilize emotionally after life's challenges. So the ones that are different, you know, that have some different terminology is relationship and awareness, and knowledge, they term as knowledge of adolescent development. Support is concrete support in times of need. So if you're not familiar with the Youth Thrive protective factors, but you are familiar with the Family Thrive or the protective factors for families, you'll see that a lot of these are directly in line with that as well. In Kentucky, we have 6 protective factors for families, but there are 5 protective factors for Youth Thrive. Does anybody have any questions about the protective factors?
So LaDonna, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to throw this comment out there while we're on this slide. You know, RIACs are required to have a youth representative on their councils, which is sometimes very hard to do, to identify a youth that meets that criteria. And then once they're identified, to get them engaged and to retain them. So that in itself is sometimes a challenge. But beyond that, the additional challenge is that the youth coming to the council sometimes doesn't have that network of other youth to connect to be able to bring their voice to RIAC. So it's not just that one youth bringing their voice, but it's collective voice from the community. And so when I look at these protective factors, and I like what you said about, you know, you want to take these protective factors and help young people to be able to use the terminology so they can relate to it and use it in their lives. So when I think about like relationship, I think about learning how to, you know, it says learning how to form safe and healthy relationships that allow you to be yourself. So, you know, these youth being able to connect with other youth in their community so they can develop that partnership, and then again, bring that voice back to RIAC, you know, finding community and resources you need to get help. So again, that connection and that support, or learning more about yourself. So I can see, like in the world of RIAC, you know, how important, you know, these protective factors are when we think about the youth and family driven movement. I can't even talk today, guys. I'm so sorry. But when we think about the youth and family driven movement that we are trying to take across the state. So I just wanted to thank you for explaining that to us.
Sure. And I want to tell you that, if you're communicating protective factors to young people, please feel free to use the protective factors in the way that we've worked with them with Youth Thrive and CSSP, because I really do think the other ones turn young people off. It was really an issue. They were using our card sets and doing that, but whenever they went to talk about the protective factors, there was somewhat uncomfortableness of, I don't want to use that word. Like, we're going to make a poster with all the protective factors, and the young people didn't want the social emotional competence, on that thing. And it's so much more easier for them to talk about awareness, especially when they're talking about their mental health, and the focus that this particular last round of leaders that we had, and their intent to really take this and talk about mental health openly with their peers. Alaysia, you to the next slide. Did somebody have a question? Sorry.
Well, I want to add one thing. It was kind of off of what Vanessa said. And I've just seen, like, it's just so important to have peer-led conversations, because that language develops without us even realizing it. And so, Donna, you said it's hard to change mindsets. Well, it's wild, because while we're having these conversations, it's not that, like, it's changing mindsets, it's seeing different perspectives. And, like, by allowing us to see the different perspectives, it's already in our brains working that, I can think differently, and that is allowed. And so that's so important. And I'm going to move to the next slide.
Okay, so effective partnerships. So I'm going to talk a little bit about forging partnerships and lessons learned. You all are members of RIAC, most of you, or about this meeting because of RIAC. And I am 54 years old, and I'm used to going to meetings. That's what we do. We go to meetings and we talk about doing things, and we go to meetings and sometimes we don't ever do anything. We just keep going to the same meetings. And in my community, I've been to probably, I've been to 8 different meetings in a month, and almost the same people are at even all of these same meetings. It's like, why are we having all these meetings? I mean, I know that we have different grants, and sometimes we form groups just because we're trying to get a grant. But I spent a lot of time just trying to educate people and change mindsets of older people about buy-in to the protective factors in general, whether it's for families or youth, and I would say, look, this is our approach. In every one of these groups, we could highlight the protective factors. We could talk about the protective factors. This could be the common ground. And for 8 years, I spent a lot of time educating my community about the protective factors. And some people caught on really quickly. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I can't keep educating people and not moving forward with this initiative. So what are the most important things? Well, the most important thing is to connect with young people. And I was trying to find young people from all of these different groups. Well, that was even another challenge. It was like this onion, right? So basically, I just went to somebody who worked in the school who had a relationship with the kids, and I formed a relationship with that person. And that's where I said, hey, could we pilot this? Could we get some young people to kind of see what matters to them, introduce these protective factors, and just have some general conversations and see what happens? Let's see what happens. Rather than planning what should happen, we just kind of took the protective factors and laid them in the lap of a group of young people to have conversations, just sitting around for 30 minutes out of their day. And from all of that, these card sets emerged, and we are where we are today. So that's kind of the evolving approach, but the partnerships have a lot to do with that. And sometimes too many meetings was really holding back the movement of where we were going. And I just took it straight to the young people and let them, and it evolved from there. So sometimes forging partnerships can be an obstacle. And that was a lesson that I learned and still am learning, but taking it on in a way of just seeing what happens and throwing it out there to the young people has been the best success story that we've had. And I'll share a little bit about that in a minute. I've had many partners in this effort, and of course, I couldn't have done it without the work of the students at Paducah Middle School who first really helped initiate this. But the most effective partnerships that I've had is with the McCracken County Public Library and with the United Way. And those partnerships have been established, but have evolved in different ways over the past, 5 or 6 years, especially. Alaysia, will you just talk a little bit about the partnership with the library and even your participation in being a part of the conversations with the young people?
Okay, so in the photo, you can see the Brary bike. We got the Brary bike in 2018, and we just pedal it around Paducah. We have a Brary bus now, a bookmobile, so we don't have to take it for miles. So the meetup that we're at is right up the street from the library. So I load the book bike, with many different books, and the books are, bestsellers, anything that I see on Book Talk. I don't know if you guys are on TikTok, but it's where you talk about books and you learn about what's popular. But anyway, just getting a bunch of those and going to low key is what we call it. And so while I'm there, I try to bring activities. You can see in the photo, I brought bubbles, but I guess these kids didn't like bubbles. I found that very odd, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, so, and we said that the book bike actually makes it an event. So, they come and they see this huge colorful thing and they're like, oh my gosh, this is where I want to be. And so the books actually serve as an icebreaker. And so usually, since they're so popular, at least one kid has read it. And so usually someone can give a summary and, it starts the conversation. And so while we sit down, it's breakout sessions. So usually about 5 to 7 kids at each table, and we get cards. Also, I didn't introduce my pronouns. My pronouns are she, her, and those are so important at our events. Just being able to I know what you want to identify as is so powerful. But yes, we sit down at the table, we introduce ourselves, and we do about 3 sessions. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe, or it's just so amazing that we're able to have these type of conversations, because just 5 years ago, whenever I was in school, we were not it wasn't allowed, or we didn't want to talk about it, or we couldn't talk about it. And so just to see how much it has changed in that short amount of time is amazing. Just like the conversations that we're having are so powerful. And we talk about literally anything. It could be from, what music we're listening to, what happened at home last night. And just through those conversations, seeing those different types of perspectives, and really being able to use your own voice is so empowering. That is not common, or some kids don't get to use their voice outside of this meeting. So it's just so empowering to see what is actually going on and taking place. And so, yes, I take the book back there, and that's where we're thinking about doing some crafts and just some other things to really get this going. And because it's going so great, we're thinking about how can we make this bigger. So yes, that's what I do with the library. Anything else I missed, LaDonna?
No, you can chime in whenever, though.
Okay.
So
there's a
Sure.
question in the chat box that I just wanted to bring to your all's attention. And the person asked, did you say book talk? I was wanting to look it up because I hadn't heard of that before.
Okay, yes. So it's on TikTok. If you use the hashtag book talk, I can put it in the chat. But that's where most of the, usually if it's on book talk, it's going to be popular. That's just how powerful TikTok is. But anyway, all of these books are bestsellers or going to be bestsellers. And yes, that is what book talk is. It's just, you know, people reviewing books, talking about what's about to be popular. And yes, that's where our teens are on TikTok. So that's where I go and try and find the material that I want to bring. Yes.
So our other most powerful partnership has been with the United Way. And the United Way probably has been using our conversation set in their PALS program, which is a mentoring program that our local United Way has in both the middle school and the high school for probably 5 years now, just going on 5 years. I'm going to talk about that just a little bit more, but this is just, I wanted to lead off with a quote that Ann Bidwell gave me. She said, "I've witnessed a diverse array of students respond with curiosity, open-mindedness, and develop leadership skills. Students are empowered to solve personal challenges." And if I just look at one of those words, I'm like, wow, like this is the most amazing thing. We created this tool that actually seems somewhat simple. Young people develop the questions along with, you know, guidance and input from us on that. And Anne has shared so many success stories. You know, when school was in session, she was meeting in person, of course, with the young people and mentors. And then they did move that to online, which did work well for that particular group because it was very well established. So the PALS program is basically students who grew up maybe with a mentor, maybe in the 3rd grade. They were behind on their reading scores. And so they were assigned a mentor that the United Way provided from someone in our community. And like I said, about 5 years ago, that group was really struggling. They said, we've worked with these kids our entire life since we're in the 3rd grade. We've been their mentors. Now they're in middle school and we go and visit them on lunch and we talk, but we need something. We need a tool to use. And we had just really developed the card sets, and those were available. And with the middle school, they use a set of cards that we call Talk. We use emojis with those, and it's really fun. And you'll see a sample of that in a minute. And then with the older group, we use a more minimalistic set that's called Shift. So what has happened now and what kind of has evolved is now the programs that the United Way is doing, both in the city and county schools, is they take these young people who maybe have struggled, in academics, and they work with them, with their mentors, to start these conversations. The young people lead the conversations, the mentors share what it was like, and they participate in the conversations, just recalling the memories from what their experiences was as a young person. So they have some really thought-provoking conversations, and it is still peer-led. There's just adults sitting at the table. They also provide that guidance and that stability for a middle school student. I feel like I'm 54 years old, so it's hard for me to recall middle school, but I feel like in middle school there's still somewhat of a struggle in like even having conversations or talking about things, and even finding yourself. Like we all know being a middle schooler is very, very difficult. It's a difficult time in our lives. And so what has happened is, since that group has been established for so long, we have young people now, and young people who are leading this effort for us in the setting like you see in this picture, who have been trained and surrounded in a group supported by adults. And then they're like, oh yeah, I love this process. And so they come on and they are now leading the high school group because they've already been trained from their experiences in middle school. Alaysia, you can move to the next slide. You all might have some more questions about that at the end. That's been an evolving approach where we used to try to do them with middle schoolers, but high schoolers led them, and sometimes middle schools led them, until now we use it as a feeder system. Our middle school is the training ground. Our middle schools are the training ground. And then in high schools, they're only peer-to-peer, and there are no adults allowed in that conversation, unless you're somebody cool like Alaysia, who just like fit right in. And they don't mind that there's an older person in their group.
No, and I can add that just being able to share my experience, what I've gone through, not giving advice, but just sharing, my experience is great. It was so funny. At one of the tables, they thought I was 17. And so I was just like, okay, yeah. But no, it's really fun. It's really laid back. And I'm so happy that, I am able to sit down at these tables and for them to feel safe with me. That's really important for me. Just like a little self goal is to always be able to provide a safe place for the youth. And so I'm so happy to be able to do that.
So these are the conversation cards, and I know you really can't read the cards on the slide, but I have one I'm going to pull up and talk with you all about in just a second. But these are, again, the tools that we use. Alaysia mentioned an icebreaker, using the books as an icebreaker, talking about music as an icebreaker, just kind of whatever it is that they want to do. But they talk about really serious things. There are some really serious things on these cards. Again, you can see, as I mentioned, the emojis are just fun things that we had a designer that we worked with develop for each one of the protective factors. We have stickers that he made that we give away at times. And so the talk cards, again, are the ones that we use for middle school kids. And the shift cards that I mentioned that are more minimalistic are the cards that we use for the high school. And we really know that protective factors go up to age 25 or 26 based on the studies by Youth Thrive and CSSP. And so we want to take these into colleges, and that's a goal. And Alaysia is going to work with our local community college at some point. But again, we have so many obstacles right now because of COVID. And a lot of plans that we have had to, been set aside because we've been in this pandemic for so long now. So I'm going to pull up. Can you go back just a minute, Alaysia? Yeah. I'm going to actually, if you'll stop sharing your screen and then we'll go back to that, I'm going to share my screen and pull up the cards. That's my granddaughter. Can everybody see her? I didn't mean to share that one, but that's up there. That's not what I want to share. Here they are. Okay, can everyone see the top card now? Can you see that card? Okay. So this is the card for, again, the ones we use for middle school. And you can kind of see what some of the questions are. And if you can't see it, I'm going to read it to you because I don't know how big your screens are. Knowledge, what do you want your relationship with your family members to look like and why? Support, in your experience, what are good things that can come out of a crisis? Resilience, how do you keep from getting overwhelmed? So you guys kind of see that. Like these are questions under each protective factor. So when Alaysia mentioned to you that they're at small tables, it's not a large table, they're at small tables. And the protective factor is chosen. So let's say we're going to do knowledge and resilience today. Those are the two things that we're going to focus on. So there's a table host that would just introduce a knowledge question. They might have two cards if they choose and pick a question that relates best to them. You can do pre-planning and pick your questions ahead of time if that's what the young person wants to do, or they can simply just draw a card out of the deck. With parent cafes, I've always chose questions that build on one another because a lot of these questions naturally dig a little deeper and build on one another, but they just share at their table. The facilitator introduces the protective factors and what they are. Then the table host takes over They have guidelines, or, as you all, if you've participated in a parent or provider cafe, we have agreements already preset. We have the agreements for young people that are very similar to agreements for families, but we have them on bookmarks. So we actually have had them on bookmarks that they can take with them if they choose to use in their books that the library gives them. But then they have a set of agreements at the table. So the facilitator also goes over the agreements, has everyone introduce themselves by their pronouns, which is something that the young people came up with. That was, an evolving thing that naturally happened. It was very exciting that one day that's how they came, then they were able to identify with and do that in a very, I don't know, it's just amazing, because I think about how we kind of hesitate with that as adults sometimes, and it's not a hesitation for the young people at all. So they talk about that at the table.
Can I add one thing? We talked about developing language, that is the language, like learning what to identify as is language that we can use to support us. And so that's what pronouns are. They help us identify or understand what we want to identify as. So just being able to pick what you want to be called is so empowering. And so that's language. So yeah, we talked about language earlier. You're welcome.
So I just wanted you to see the cards, and each card set comes with a set of directions. Can you all see that I've changed the screen? I want to make sure. Okay. So each card set comes with a set of directions. The directions, if you've ever played a game called Exploding Kittens, or you have a team that has played that game before, the direction set that goes with it is very much directed to young people and something that they're used to, right? It's not some outline that some adult wrote that you have to follow in order to play this game. It's supposed to be fun. And I know it's not a game, but I think you all know why we would do it this way. So it has the protective factors. It also talks about, in each one of them, the other one has the little emoji people on it. I just wanted to show you the guides. And this is the guide that comes with the shift set. And then the one with the emojis comes with the blue set. And it really just tells you how to do it. And this was, again, something that happened because we developed the card sets in our local community for our local community. And we were getting reports back that some of our partners who had been trained to do these conversations with young people and serve as either mentors or to just be there for support for peer, that they were using these cards in a way that was detrimental to the process. So even partners that had been trained were taking a card and then just grilling the young people, like they were setting them around the table and saying something like, when is it hard to be yourself in a group? And they're reading that question and just grilling the people at the table. Well, the answer to that is right now. It's hard to be in this group when you have someone that's reading the card. So these directions are something that we just did about 2.5 years ago and started including in the card set. My passion for this, and I'll let Alaysia go back to the PowerPoint. My passion for this is to give young people a voice and to put protective factors in their life that I did not have as a young person. And I had many struggles as a young person, as many of you on this call did. And this tool is extremely powerful because it is peer-led, because it is an evolving approach, and the many, many success stories that we've had. And, I was going to share some more success stories, but I want to allow time for questions, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'm just trying to be cognizant of our time together.
Okay.
Okay, so this is Kate and this is Alaysia. So Kate went off to college last year and Alaysia went off to college this year. We have had other leaders these are just the latest two who really took what we had this summer and imparted their knowledge and their experience to the teens in our local Loki group. So I'm just going to read very quickly what they said and then share for just a couple more minutes and then see what questions you all might have. So this is Kate's key insight. This is what means the most to her. Previous outreach techniques I participated in as a young person, though well-intended, all failed to do the one thing that make these cards so successful. They geared at trying to crack students' shells. No program had truly ever valued our opinions. That's the power of mental health for students, by students. And then Alaysia just had some favorite parts that he wanted to share. The space created makes us feel safe, and I can speak my mind and not feel judged. As a leader, I can listen and share input from my own life. We talk about things that are relevant to our lives, and it is empowering to feel heard. All of those things are very powerful, and those are things that we hear from other young people. But I don't get to hear it directly. I hear it from Alaysia. But it's really not the cards as much as it is taking the protective factors. That is the key. That is my favorite part. That is Alaysia's favorite part. We take these protective factors and they're framed in a way that young people can relate to one another. Alaysia, the next slide we have is Q&A. So I think I'm just going to have Alaysia stop the PowerPoint so we can all just see each other's faces and just allow you all any opportunity to share thoughts that you might have or to ask questions.
I would like to add one thing. We talked about sitting down and having the conversation. For me, whenever I was, 15, I would feel like a little nervous to share. But these kids, they sit down and they are ready to share whatever the question is. They're so ready to answer, and just providing that safe place for them to feel comfortable enough to share whatever they want to share is amazing.
Well, we didn't really get to have the conversation I wanted. So I would like to, I know that your time is very limited, but could we just have maybe 5 or 6 people or, even 2 or 3 people share how they think this might work or how you can make this work in your community? And I will say this summer, our plan was, we had 2 leaders, Alaysia and Kate. We had 2 leaders, and how are we going to get more leaders? And what we decided was we would just have a sign-up sheet, and anybody that enjoyed the experience and wanted to think about being a host or a facilitator, that they would sign that sheet. And then Alaysia is meeting with those kids, either one-on-one or in groups, and saying, when would you like to do it? And they're picking dates, and we're scheduling the coffee shop and giving them the supplies. So basically it's all on them. We're just here to support them and provide the resources for them to do it. And we've had probably 5 or 6 people that want to plan and do them, not just lead at the table, but plan and do them. So that's been a new approach that we've had. Instead of just planting 1 or 2 leaders, we had a leader in the city schools and one in the county. Now we're just whoever wants to do it. And our effort initially was ran by homeschoolers.
Yeah.
There's not a certain amount of youth that make it better. We have had great conversations with one table, which is something that we've had in the past. But since COVID, in our sessions this summer, we've had about 24 people at each one. Tonight is a big game, a big high school rivalry game, and we didn't know that when we planned. So I don't know if we'll have as many people this afternoon or not, but we're having 1 a month. That's what we're having, 1 a month. And rain cancels because it's outside.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to revert back to the chat box, but go ahead, then we'll go there.
Well, just going off of what LaDonna said, anyone can host an event, and just taking these to different organizations, different groups, diverse groups, you never know who is going to, feel open and take something away from the meeting. And that's what's so wild, so amazing.
So in the chat box, there's a question. It said, you may have said this and I missed it, but is there a certain number of youth that makes it better, bigger or smaller?
Alaysia, what do you think?
I've seen it both. I think teens like to see big groups, but allowing 5 to 7 kids at each table allows them to be able to feel more included than just sitting around in a huge table. But just for a teen or any kid to walk in and see, oh, this is really happening, this is a thing that I want to be a part of. So I say yes to both, bigger and smaller. Yes.
24 has been a great amount. It's just very exciting. And when she brings that brewery bike up, then it makes it an event. Like, this is something special for me by my peers.
Yeah.
This cool thing, we can get these free books.
Do we have any other questions or thoughts on the information that's been presented today?
I actually have a question. LaDonna, you said that you actually provide the materials for the event. How would somebody reach out to you if we wanted to say, take it to like 2 targeted schools that we know have like a bit identified as far as a need for activities and areas to support the youth in those 2 particular school district areas? How would we bring that to them, or what materials could we provide to them, or who would be the contact person that we could get them connected to so that they actually have what they need to get this up and going in those?
Well,
those schools?
again, I want to say that, this is not my full-time job at all. This is just my passion. Right. Alaysia, I've talked to Alaysia about her taking on the road and paying her to be able to do this, but we all have full-time jobs, right? So we can't do this without some kind of reimbursement for us to help people with it, because we have to take off work in order to do that. And our young people, we want to value them. So, our facilitators, we give them a $25 gift card to the coffee shop. We provide some incentives for people to say they value me. It's not that we're paying people to do it. We're valuing people through the process. And so we want to value also our time. I typed in the website connectdiscoverlaunch.com, and that's where you can see the card sets that you can purchase. You can also contact me, and I'll put in the email as well, enrichfamilies.@gmail.com. You can also contact me, and I'll be happy to create a dialogue with you, talk to you about, supporting you as much as I can. If it becomes a time effort where I'd have to come or Alaysia and I would come to a school, of course, we would have to have some costs associated with that. The card sets are $38 a piece. We have no paid staff. And when you look at the card sets, there's actually an attachment, a PDF, where you can actually see and print the directions or look at the directions to see if it's something that you think this school would want to do. You can show them this and say, hey, these are the card sets and this is the directions that go with it, so they can see the basis for what we're doing. But as far as the fidgets and all those kind of things, we buy those with the sales of our card sets. We're doing everything we're doing with the sales of our card sets. And that just promotes, that for us. If you had a grant, you can purchase the things. Fidgets leave. And also with COVID, sometimes you let kids take the fidgets with them, right? You're like, choose a fidget, keep a fidget, that's something that we've done. But it doesn't really cost that much. Some kids might even, if you're doing it outside, kids might bring their own thing. A school might provide a snack or a lunch. When we initially started doing this, we didn't have any funds, and we were still able to do both parent cafes and these events for young people. So the card sets are really the only cost. And if you could use some of your coronavirus relief dollars, to purchase the card sets. I also have big, like those tabletop posters that I had made locally. I'll be happy to share that information with you all if you wanted to get a big pop-up poster. The young people that have led us so far, they're like, I think that good pop-up poster is good to share with other adults, but the kids don't care anything about having a pop-up poster. So the kids just need to be able to facilitate these conversations. You might say, oh, hey, I could create these conversations myself and create my own cards or my own, like, here's a question. But having a tool, having something printed out, it really values them. This is our card set. Like for our local kids, I give them a card set. When we meet with the kids that say they want to lead, I just give them a card set. And I can do that because other communities, purchase the card set. I don't want you to think that we are this huge organization. We have about $3,000 in the bank, and we make enough that we can keep these going, doing one a month. I mean, that's kind of the baseline for what we're doing. It's very grassroots, but it's been good. Any other, did I answer your question, Michelle? I mean, was I helpful? And Alaysia will help you as much as we can.
I want to say that go where your kids are. You don't have to create a new program. Go find them and just, sit down and create this. You don't have to make a whole new thing.
And it is very much a diverse group of kids. I mean, these kids are very, very diverse. And I think part of that comes from kids being familiar with the process as a middle schooler. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, different clubs and organizations have talked about it within the schools. And so we've reached kids who are very, I hate to use the word popular, but we've reached really popular kids, and we've reached kids that are loners. I see it as a life-changing thing for a community. And again, it's not about our cards, it's about the protective factors, but the questions are very intentional, and they were created for students by students. And I think that's the difference. We're, and they're very open-ended.
Going off of what Donna said, she talked about popular and loner kids. When we get to low key, they sit with their friends, but we mix them up. So you don't know who's going to be at your table. And that creates more openness to be able to share, because you don't know these people.
So the wheels are turning in my mind after hearing this presentation, and I'm thinking about as RIACs and the system of care partners that they have on their councils. I'm thinking about what you said about how some of these mini leaders were planted in the city and county schools when you first got started. And so Friskies are a required member of the RIAC. And so if it's something that you're interested in, when you're at RIAC, feel free to bring up that discussion when you're there. If that partnership is already formed with the RIAC, you've got a person planted in the school, and I'm going to put Maxine on the spot here and ask about some funding opportunities. So within the Department of Behavioral Health, there is a System of Care 5 grant that's currently going on across the state. And through that grant, there is a System of Care 5 partner funding opportunity, with one more available funding opportunity that I think is due in October. So Maxine, with what you've heard today, would that funding be available if a community partner wanted to apply for it to be able to fund the startup of one of these groups?
I think it would. Well, our population of focus is, of course, children who have been involved with DCBS but remain in the home of their parent. So, or caretaker, they're just not in the custody of DCBS. So as long as that target population was also sort of recruited or looked at to be a part of it, I'm thinking it would be. When you're at your RIAC, we, like she said, 9 of the RIACs across the state are part of the System of Care 5 grant. And so we give them $5,000 to have at least one action item that addresses that system of care population. So I'm thinking that would be a good place to start talking to them to say, hey, is this something we could look at? Because I know we did the dinner tabletop, where we targeted those. And see, I'm thinking this would be something, because we are talking about connecting kids, getting them involved, and using those protective factors, which would help them to, build some self-esteem and confidence, and maybe work out some of the issues that are in their home, helping them to address those things. So I think it would be.
So if it were a RIAC that's involved in cohort 1 or cohort 2, but let's say the Friskies partner wanted to apply for the funding to be that main person, that could happen within that RIAC. It just wouldn't be the RIAC submitting the application. It would be the Friskies partner submitting it, or anybody else at the table.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the RIAC itself, because we give them money for something, but any other partner at the table can apply, and they're usually around $5,000. You don't have to apply for the full 5,000. If you can get this up and started at 2,000, you can do that, but 5,000 is the average amount. October, and I had just talked to Dee Dee, and she said that we may be looking at moving the date back to November to do it, but that's another opportunity that people would be able to apply for funding. So, and as soon as we get that clarified, if they move the date or anything, I'll send that to Vanessa. She'll send it out to everybody. But yes, we've had quite a few people. I know in the first round, they funded maybe 18 to 20 people to do different activities. And they are looking for startup things that will end up being able to maintain without coming for additional funding from our agency. So I'm thinking that would be something good.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, I want to thank LaDonna and Alaysia for this information, and you guys for spending your time with us this Friday morning. As a reminder, this has been recorded, and it's going to be available on the RIAC webpage. That'll take about a week or so. Our next RIAC learning series is scheduled for October 1st at 10 a.m. The topic is using focus groups to guide community change, and our presenters are Liz Moreland. She is the LRC of the Bluegrass RIACs, and Tanya Johnson and Angela Bush with Tailored. So I hope you can join us for that learning session as well. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great holiday weekend.
Bye.